Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tellil Community Television. This week, on The Record, the RCMP identified the man who died after jumping into the Strait of Canso. The manager of energy sector development for the Municipality of the County of Richmond and the Town of Port Hawkesbury explains the clean fuel strategy for the Strait of Canso. EverWind Fuels announces that an independent study shows its Point Tupper project can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the Interim Leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party hits on a number of issues. But first, the Warden of Richmond talks about the impacts of continued hot and dry weather on the municipality. Some with the Richmond Warden Lois Landry, the Municipality of the County of Richmond's administrative offices here in Arishat. Now, recently the municipality made an appeal to residents to reduce their water usage due to extremely low precipitation in recent weeks and no significant rainfall expected in the near future. The municipality is requesting that customers of the Richmond Water Utility follow voluntary water conservation measures until further notice. Since that request was made, we received a bit of rain, but overall, the weather has remained hot and dry. What is the situation with municipal water services at the moment?
So there are municipal water services that are the responsibility of Richmond County, the municipality of the County of Richmond. So that would be, for example, in Loosedale and Arishat, St. Peters, Arishat, Pettigrew, and Lake Lower River, Evanston area. So there is a separate utility that is managed by the village of St. Peters. So they're in a little bit of a different boat, but I'll speak about Richmond County's utilities. Currently, all is well in that we do not have to put in any mandatory restrictions, but we do have voluntary restrictions, being very cognizant of the lack of rain we've already had, and holy moly, no rain in the forecast for now another week. Did have a little rain, as you mentioned, but certainly not enough. And anybody who has tried to pick blueberries or has taken some of their, there's some creative things we can do. We'll speak about that in a second. But if you're washing dishes and you have some leftover dishwater, rather than putting that through the sink, I know we tried to just water one of our bushes that we had put in, and you have to put a small amount of it and let that kind of soak in. So we can tell the ground is really, we're in rough shape. So the municipality's water systems are asking users to voluntarily, at this point, limit their consumption of water. So essentially that involves being mindful of the ways that you can reduce and to just not do anything that's not essential. So some things you can do is, don't do dishes until you have a full sink. Don't do laundry until you have a full load. But primarily, your car just maybe should be dirty for the foreseeable future, and no pressure wash. Lots of us, we were going to stain our deck and then, pressure wash it first. That's just not happening until who knows when. So any of those kinds of things that residents can do, if your flowers are something you take a lot of pride in, just use a dishpan for your dishes and use that water, and use, so there's ways that you can sort of use gray water for that. I will say that St. Peters, not the responsibility of Richmond County Municipality, but they have a website and they've posted mandatory restrictions there. So they're a little bit further along in their concerns than we are. So they've actually said any non-essential use that they see, that they've even talked about cutting off your service. We need to be mindful. And I do want to just maybe speak a little bit to remind residents that, not all of Richmond County is on municipal water infrastructure. So I live out in Pullman. We don't have water or sewer services. We have our own well. So, if I want to water my lawn, I guess I'm allowed to. There's no restrictions on private well owners. But two things about that. Number one, draining your well is a significant it's a significant headache. And also the water table that you draw from probably has to support other wells of your neighbors. So being mindful that, this is a pretty significant challenge for all of us. We need to find ways to kind of work together on that.
Now, you mentioned about restrictions in St. Peter's and that the municipalities doesn't foresee doing that now. What would it take for there to be restrictions? Would it take another week or two of basically no rain at all, or what's?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. Number one is the actual metrics that we are seeing in the water infrastructure. So, our staff are vigilantly watching the numbers in terms of where are we with capacity. But then I also think if we're lucky, we've got some people who have been working with us for a long time. So should they start to see, holy smokes, like we're going to get at this rate, they can anticipate that we will be at this level down the road. You may see some sort of judgment call come in there, but as it stands right now, the voluntary restrictions have been enough to keep us where we need to be. And that's really to say thank you to residents who are abiding by those restrictions. I think those of us who have lived here for a long time don't remember a time where we had this little rain. And so I think we're all recognizing the significance of this. And, the grass is crunchy. And I was at the ball games, the provincial tournament this weekend, and the infield and the outfield look exactly the same. You can't tell where the infield ends. So, we're seeing, you couldn't put your clothes on the line this week because of the smell of smoke from fires in the rest of the province. So we're seriously aware of the impact of fire. And so I think people are very, very mindful of what it means to be without water.
Now, you mentioned that there's, quite a few residents of Richmond who aren't on municipal water systems and have their own wells that they've dug or were dug for them. So what is being done for them? I understand that some people can't actually get water here at the municipal building, is it?
Right. So if your well has run dry, we would encourage you to reach out to the municipality. But I can already tell you that if you go to our webpage or our Facebook posts, you'll see that the municipality will support folks whose wells have gone dry. So you can purchase water from the municipality's water source. You do it through buckets and tubs. I think it's like $6 or something for 1,000 liters. So you would come to the municipal office, pay for that, make an appointment to reach out to the municipal staff, and we can hook you up. And again, that's only for essential services like your well. So we're not in the business of. I can imagine pools are starting to, as the water evaporates. I can imagine your pools are probably not at the levels they should be. We're just going to have to manage that. And if I could say one other thing to residents, in addition to kind of, being mindful about the restrictions, one thing I would encourage folks, particularly if you are on a municipal water supply system, if you see any leaks, report that right away. So old systems always have leaks. There's always some maintenance that needs to get done. We are in a precarious situation enough that a leak somewhere that would be a minor inconvenience could really have significant impact. So if you are anywhere on a municipal water source, if you see any leaks, please report that to the municipality as right away.
The provincial government is restricting travel and activities in the woods because continued hot, dry weather conditions have greatly increased the risk of wildfires. They said hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits, and camping is allowed only in campgrounds. On August 6th, the provincial government then banned the use of all fireworks and pyrotechnic displays. I assume you agree with these decisions?
100% agree with these measures. So, if you lived here a few years ago and lived through Fiona and even Hurricane Dorian before that, if you're traveling between Pearl Store and the old church in Discouse, there's a little kind of gully there, and you can see the number of trees that were knocked down and how it is just dried out dead wood now. Imagine that in the middle of all of Alma Dam. Imagine that in all of in all of District 5. We know that the woods are a tinderbox at this point, and people that I've seen who are against this and talking about their rights, I don't know what to say to that. We are a community that will never leave you go into the woods and let you go, so, unharmed. So if you go into the woods and you don't cause a fire, but something else has, somebody's got to go looking for you, because we're not leaving you there. We are not leaving you there. And you can say, no, nobody's leaving you there, because that's not who we are and that's not who we want to be. But it takes nothing. I have heard of people who have been mowing their lawns and their blade of their lawnmower dinged a rock and the spark started a grass fire. We've heard examples of people who have these really decorative sort of globe things in their gardens on top of mulch because they're pretty and they set off these kind of rainbow things, and those have caused fire. It would take nothing to ignite fires in all of Richmond County. So we are really asking residents to be mindful of the very dangerous circumstances that we're in, and to support your neighbors and to support the fire services people who are ultimately going to be responsible for saving us in those instances. So, I would be remiss if I didn't make note of the fact that for a good chunk of time, I think it was yesterday or the day before, it was nothing but an overwhelming sense of smoke. And those were fires from the Annapolis Valley. So imagine what those firefighters are dealing with day after day after day. If there are a few inconveniences that we can just live with for a very short time, and as one person on Facebook said, all of a sudden everybody's a hiker, there are still places where you can go. So Pondville Beach is still opened. You can still go to the park in Martinique. I can't go into the trails, but there's lots of beautiful places to walk along the water's edge. So there are lots of places you can go. This isn't much of a sacrifice.
Now, there was some debate about whether or not people, you just mentioned, I should be allowed in the parks. Now, as you mentioned, in Martinique, the park is basically right along the water, but you still can't access the trails, I'm assuming as well, too. So do you agree with that people should still be allowed in parks right now and camping and stuff like that? Or do you think maybe it's possible that the province might revisit that decision sometime soon? Because as you noted, we're not due to get any rain for some time.
Right. So I think what you saw was the province had the woods ban. And then a few days later, they came out with the fireworks ban, because fireworks that are your own fireworks, so something you put off, that was in the initial ban, I believe. But then they said even commercial fireworks were banned. So I think what the province has been doing is being mindful of, as things deteriorate, we are going to have to put more measures in place. And I'm very supportive of that incremental approach. So the trails in Martinique Park, as an example, those are closed because they are trails. So for those, if you remember the loops we used to go in the kids, you can actually, it's a really nice walking trail, but that's sort of banned.
Even the trail, I think, behind the beach in Pondville,
I would imagine.
I would suspect that's also closed too, even though that's right on the dunes. Right near the water, it does travel through the woods.
Yep. And you'd have to really get through the woods to get there. So now if you want to go to Back Beach by kayak, fill your boots, right? There's a way to kind of do that. But it may be, so right now, currently, you can go to the parks. And I think what the province has said is we want people to be outside and we want people to be able to enjoy. But there are just certain measures that are too risky. Should we not get rain for the foreseeable future? Should we end up in a situation where there's a fire not far, for example, that takes our resources, then we'll have to reevaluate. And I'm certainly always happy to see people, kind of taking an incremental approach to restrictions, because you're saying, look, we don't want to cut everything off. We want to be careful. But yeah, we're all kind of going to have to do the things we need to do to keep us as safe as we can be.
Now, these restrictions, does this also affect municipal services and like the location of some municipal properties? Because I know some of them are kind of in the woods or in that area. What's the impact on the municipality thus far, I guess?
I think that what the province is doing is they're saying, homeowners can go onto their own property. There are restrictions, though. You're not supposed to take people with you, those kinds of places. There are other places that have banned ATV use. So that's an additional restriction that, we'll see how that rolls out in the municipality or beyond that. There are also restrictions that Natural Resources have put out about commercial enterprises in there. Look, should we have a problem with our watershed, for example, that supplies water to all of Ayrshire, so taking just up the road here. Sure, our folks are able to go in there, but they will go in there in a very particular way, in a way that manages all the restrictions. And so we're going to do all the things that we need to do based on what the province says we're allowed to do.
Now, I know that Richmond County isn't any different than any other part of the province, but how grave is the wildfire threat right now here, and how much of a concern is it to you? Not to try to scare anybody, but I think it's time to be realistic.
Yeah. So if you own woodland, you probably already have a sense of how bad the woods are right now in terms of their condition. And when you think about the earth and what we know about the planet and how it kind of the ebb and the flow of regeneration, the fact is, if this was a completely uninhabited part of the world, a fire would actually be a good thing, because there is so much dead wood inside Isle Madame, as an example. The best thing would be for fire to kind of take that out so that you see growth. We've seen that in places in northern Quebec, that fires that have been challenging have actually regenerated that's definitely part of the ebb and flow of how the planet works. The problem is we all live here now, and we live and we exist, and we want to raise our families here. So fire would be absolutely devastating. And I appreciate what you're saying about, we're not different than other parts of the province, but I would say we are, in that we know we have god awful cell service here. So we had already in May a fire in Framboise, and we saw the challenges that come with a lack of being able to communicate. So I would say we're even worse off. The other thing I can, look really happy to celebrate the support we got from CBRM as an example. The problem is we are all going to be very mindful of allowing our people to go somewhere else at some point, because what if fire breaks out where we are? So when we had the situation in Framboise, it was sort of unique to Framboise, and we didn't have fires all around us. The weather wasn't as dry. So I think we're not going to be able to see the support from other fire departments, and DNR is already spread pretty thin. So the entire province is a tinderbox. So yeah, we should all be concerned, and those are the reasons why we should, we should be particularly mindful. And I don't mean to be anybody, I don't want to be melodramatic about it, but you've got Straight Mutual Aid, I think, saying, look, here's a place where you can go and get one of those water pumps that might help you in the event of a fire. So if the people who protect us in fire are telling us to be ready, we should take heed.
And that leads to my next question, is about the preparations that you guys have in play right now. I assume, since the wildfire season kind of accelerated, that you guys have a lot of preparations. You just mentioned about allocating resources elsewhere when there might be a need here, and I assume that's all part of those preparations that are in place.
Yeah, one thing that Richmond has done in the last couple of years is, first off, we have staff assigned to this. So we have an emergency measures coordinator. And so that has been really a game changer for us in terms of being mindful of how we respond as a municipality. That EMO coordinator actually planned an event back in May for us, so we're all trained on incident command, tactical kinds of things. But then we also had a training session that included Red Cross. It included, like, DFO had people there, and people from nursing homes, and all of that. We had a lot of people who came together, and actually it was the day of the fire in Framboise. So we actually had a day-long event. So, for example, training around what is the role of the municipality in terms of if there are evacuation orders. So that actually falls under the purview of the warden. So, you know, it's important for all of us in council to be mindful of what our responsibility is and how we keep people safe. So there has been a lot that has happened in Richmond County in the last 2 years, and folks are in good hands with our fire services people. So we have, you know, just some of the most dedicated people in fire services, and we saw a tremendous response from DNR because so firefighters, our fire departments, they fight.
After making an appeal to the public for information, the RCMP said it identified the man who was found deceased in Alls Cove. On October 14th, at around 8:55 p.m., Antigonish County District RCMP said they responded to multiple calls that a man was walking on the travel portion of Highway 104 in Alls Cove near the center line and was impeding traffic. When officers arrived at the scene and interacted with the man, the RCMP said he fled and jumped off a steep embankment into the ocean, disappearing from their sight. The RCMP said the man jumped into the Strait of Canso at around the 13200 block of Highway 104 at around 9 p.m. The RCMP said officers contacted fire services and the Joint Rescue Coordination Center for assistance in searching for the man. At approximately 11 p.m., the RCMP said officers in a boat from the Port Hawkesbury detachment recovered the man's remains about 200 feet offshore with the help of firefighters. After making database inquiries, checking fingerprints, and reviewing internal and external bulletins, the RCMP appealed to the public to help identify the man. Hours after reaching out to the public, the RCMP thanked members of the public for their assistance in identifying the man and noted that the investigation is ongoing with the assistance of the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner Office. Our thoughts are with the man's loved ones during this difficult time, the RCMP added. Joining me is the Manager of Energy Sector Development for the Municipality of the County of Richmond and the Town of Port Hawkesbury. Welcome, Martin Thompson.
Hi there.
So for the uninitiated, perhaps you can describe your role with the municipality and the town.
Sure thing. Yeah, so as you said, I'm the Manager of Energy Sector Development. It's a fixed term role going until the end of December 2026. It's part funded by federal government through ACOA, part funded through the province, through the Department of Energy, and then the remaining funding is made up of the two municipalities, Town of Port Hawkesbury and Municipality of the County of Richmond. So I'm tasked with overseeing some pieces of strategy work as they relate to sort of emerging green energy industries in the Strait area. So one strategy I've been working on was the Strait of Canso Sustainable Infrastructure Strategy, which was basically a review of the port and industrial infrastructure that we have in the region to see how it matches up against the requirements of onshore wind deployment, clean fuels, also green hydrogen and ammonia production and export, and build out of facilities, and also with a look at offshore wind requirements. So we had some consultants working on that one, Waterford Energy Services. We worked with them on it. That was published in January. Another one is one where we're working very closely with the province and other sort of province-wide stakeholders, which is looking into the feasibility of establishing an offshore wind center of excellence in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. So AECOM has been the consultants on that one. We're just finishing that one up. We're hoping to publish that one hopefully next month. That one should become public, but that's much more of a province-wide strategy that we're leading together with partners there. And then there's this Clean Fuels Fund that we'll talk about today, and some other sort of strategy bits. So that's a big part of my role, both in terms of green energy, increasingly also in terms of climate change related activity, where I'm overseeing some work in terms of risks associated with extreme storm event flood hazard mapping for Point Tupper and the county. So we have a project there I'm working on as well. And then it's just also like a more general role of economic development, kind of being the person on the ground that can respond to potential businesses that are looking at the area, might want to invest, might want to start something here. I can be a point of contact, kind of be there to answer their questions or provide them referrals to to other people that can answer that question. So I work quite closely with the Cape Breton Partnership that I'm sure the viewers will be familiar with in that type of activity. So quite a varied role, but very much so coming back to the green energy aspect.
So the provincial government announced it is supporting several green hydrogen projects in the second round of funding from the Clean Fuels Fund. And all 7 projects involving clean fuels innovation were awarded a total of $3 million. Among the recipients, the Municipality of the County of Richmond will use $221,250 to develop a clean fuel strategy for the Strait of Canso. Perhaps you can talk about maybe the origins of this study, where it started and where it's at now.
For sure, yeah. So as you're aware, there's 2 businesses in Richmond County right now that wants to build a hydrogen and ammonia production facility and then sort of associated export activities with that. That's kind of then a lot of associated activity with that, with onshore wind and things like that. But we're looking at it seeing, okay, so if clean fuels are going to be produced locally, let's have a look at where it can also be applied locally. Is there a market locally? And if so, where in our local economy in the Strait of Canso could these fuels that are going to be produced be applied? So basically, looking at how locally produced fuel also can help with the sort of local green transition, the decarbonization, and also economic development locally. So that's the kind of main thinking behind it.
According to the Nova Scotia Department of Energy, the aim of the green fuel strategy is to harness the significant green hydrogen potential for local heavy industry. Perhaps you can explain the intent of the study in a little bit more detail. What I know you're looking at applications of it in everyday life, I guess, is kind of how I read it. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I can go into more detail on that one. So we've kind of divided our local economy into some certain areas or pillars. So one of them, as you say, is heavy industry. So looking at who are the industrial users in the county and surrounding area that are quite today heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and how could clean fuels in the future perhaps help to decarbonize some of their activities. So you have several businesses in Point Tupper, but you also have a lot of sort of trucking companies and things like that. So that goes into the second pillar, which is the transportation sector. So we're looking at the trucking access element of it. We're also wanting to try and perhaps look at some of the aviation activity that takes place at the airport in Port Hastings, to see in the future is general airport operations, could they be decarbonized by some of these clean fuels, and even could there be scope to have some kind of pilot project, no pun intended, with an actual aircraft fueled by clean fuels in the future. So that's kind of part of that package we want to scope. Another pillar is marine vessels. So everything from sort of fishing vessels to some of the larger vessels that come into the Strait of Canso region, carrying aggregate, carrying all types of product. Could they be potentially fueled by this? And in connection with that, could there be some bunkering activities taking place as well in the Strait of Canso, where these vessels are receiving clean fuels through bunkering activities? Then another pillar is kind of government operations. So look at first and foremost ourselves as municipalities, our public works, some of the heavy equipment and machinery that's being used in municipal operations. In the future, what are the potentials for that to be fueled by clean fuels? Also looking at the sort of more provincial government operations that take place in terms of road maintenance, snow plowing, all that. Again, quite heavy equipment and machinery that's being used for that type of operation. So we want to look at that as well. And then another pillar, sort of the final of those pillars is one we've sort of called utilities. So perhaps looking at what we know, we want to work with with, for example, Nova Scotia Power in this, looking at the power plant in Point Tupper that's fueled by coal now, but there's plans for an LNG conversion. And so one of the aims of this study is trying to kind of look at, is it possible when you go, if you're going to start burning natural gas rather than coal, is there any scope to maybe blend in 5%, 10% hydrogen into that mix as well, so we can create electricity from it as well? I'm just going to keep going for a little bit. You can stop me if it's too much. So those are kind of the pillars we've divided it into. Then sitting underneath of all of that is what we're asking consultants to look at, is then the required infrastructure that will be needed to kind of service all of this, right? So we've talked about the producers, or the potential producers that are here that want to build facilities that's going to produce it. But we've also asked for an overview of, okay, so first of all, what is the required additional required infrastructure, and where should it be located? So, for example, like would be a refueling station, both that's roadside for bigger trucks, and one that's maybe on the marine side for the vessels that I talked about further. So infrastructure like that, different conversion facilities as well. What would they look like? What would they require, and where should they be located? So that's part of the scope of work too. So that's kind of when we're looking at what's here today and how we can decarbonize what's here today. Another aspect to the strategy will also be the sort of future opportunities that could be associated with clean fuels production taking place. So basically, if hydrogen is produced here, what are some quite energy intensive industries that might not be here today, but that could be attracted to come in here because of the local availability of green hydrogen and other clean fuels? So it could be green steel, green cement, chemical manufacturing, those type of industries, So we're asking consultants. So that's kind of applying a bit more of an economic development lens. What further investment could be locally as a result of the availability of clean fuels? So that's kind of a high level overview of kind of the scope of work of the strategy, what we want to try and find answers to.
Now, Richmond Warden Lois Landry said the funding will enable the county and project partners to create a roadmap on how to decarbonize key areas of the local economy and attract new industries through the application and availability of locally produced clean fuels. Now, you were talking about industrial, larger users. Is smaller scale users going to be covered in the study, or is this going to be included in maybe another study or other studies down the road?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So definitely sort of bigger users are part of it, but I guess it depends what you mean by smaller user.
I guess is smaller than, the airport or, industry or anything like that. Maybe individual uses, smaller businesses, maybe like a taxi cab company, some nonprofits, things of that nature.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. No, definitely. And I guess the one thing I didn't mention, I know it's the Clean Fuels Fund, but what we're also kind of going to look at a little bit, but not in depth in the strategy, is electrification. Because once you come down to that level where it is smaller, so like take cars and trucks and things like that. I know there are car manufacturers that are looking at hydrogen, and I'm certainly not in the know about what's going to be the future fuel of personal cars. It might be a mixture, but I know kind of what I'm hearing a lot is that sort of smaller personal cars is perhaps more suited for electrification rather than clean fuels, and then it's the kind of larger road vehicles like trucks and things that you want to power through clean fuels. It's similar with vessels. If you have a fishing boat that kind of fishes close to shore and doesn't go that far, electrification might be the better kind of way to fuel or power that vessel. Again, that's the type of stuff the strategy is gonna look at and find out. But it's just to kind of illustrate, once it comes down to a smaller scale, sometimes perhaps electrification is what will be looked at. but to your point, like looking at blending hydrogen blending hydrogen with LNG at a power plant, for example, that should have a benefit for domestic households as well, because obviously it's part of the power supply, right? But no, we'll involve everybody that wants to be involved in the study for sure. So this might be a good opportunity to say we're planning to have kind of like an introductory webinar next month. So we'll stay tuned for some communications around that, where everybody will kind of be invited, and we'll be there. We're working with the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance on this webinar. They'll be hosting it, and Deloitte will be there. So anybody interested locally and otherwise can tune in and learn more about the project. And then from there, we'll have some more sort of on the ground engagement activity and things. So yeah, no, anybody who's interested, we'd like to involve them one way or the other.
According to the province, other projects explore further potential for hydrogen to decarbonize transportation and the use of biomass for heating and clean fuel. So I suppose this would be helpful to the EverWind Fuels and Bearhead Energy projects you referenced earlier in Point Tupper.
For sure, yeah. I'll let them answer that themselves, but certainly it's about this would looking into like finding a pathway to create a market locally for a product that they are intending to produce. Yeah.
So these projects are on the go. They've moved along some stages of development here and there, and I assume that one of the reasons for this study is because of the state that these projects are in. This is a good time now to prepare and to lay some of the groundwork here.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, it's that's a huge incentive and a huge motivator to do that. We're very blessed with having these companies wanting to set up shop here and produce a fuel that's going to be crucial globally in the future for decarbonization for hard to abate industries and sectors. So for us to then, yeah, it just makes sense that we would look at locally how can we use that product. So not they're intending to export it at first. I think Europe's their primary target because, as I understand it, the market there for actually using this stuff is more developed than here. But that doesn't mean that if the market develops here, which this strategy will kind of hopefully give us some advice on how to do that, that they could sell the product locally as well. So for sure. And again, you'd have to ask the province this, but it's companies like these that are in Nova Scotia is probably also part of the reason why we have a clean fuels fund to begin with, I think.
Speaking of the province, Energy Minister in Richmond MLA Trevor Boudreau said Nova Scotia is seizing tremendous opportunities to develop and use low carbon and renewable fuels to power industries and businesses. Through the Clean Fuels Fund, the Richmond MLA said his government is providing a financial boost to innovators who want to put these fuels to work and help grow the green economy. Is the assumption that the projects in Point Tupper are proceeding, like I said earlier, it looks like they're on the way. We don't know for sure if they're going to come to fruition, but it certainly looks that way. And they've gone along stages of development that it looks like they're going to happen. Now, I'm not asking you to look into the future and predict what's going to happen, but at the stages that they are in various stages of development, it certainly looks like these things are going to happen. We just had a couple of tugs that arrived for the EverWind. So it seems like these milestones keep coming and it seems to be more real each day.
Yeah. As an observer myself, like you, yeah, it's there certainly seems to be a lot of momentum and a lot of plans, a lot of investment going on. So yeah, no, we're all hopeful that it'll happen. Definitely.
And it could definitely mean big things for this area. Let's face it. We're not just talking about direct employment. We're talking about the investment. And you alluded to this earlier. One of the, I guess, selling points of it is the fact that other businesses can hook on to this new source of renewable energy.
Yeah. So that's one part of it. That's definitely one. The other part is the supply chain that's required for these industries, where there should be local opportunities as well. Actually, Deloitte, who we contracted to do this study for us, is just, I think, wrapping up another study Atlantic Canada wide, looking into the supply chain opportunities for in hydrogen and clean fuel. So really keen to see the results of that study and what that could mean for local businesses here.
And also, too, the other aspect of that is, there's uses domestically in Atlantic Canada and Canada in general, but there's also a big export market and potential out there, and I'm thinking of Europe in particular, but other parts of the world, and that's a big plus too for these projects.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as I kind of mentioned before, well, from what I'm seeing, I think the market in Europe is maybe not quite there, but they're certainly further ahead than we are here. So what that does for producers here is that it provides them that ability and opportunity to scale up operations while we prepare for a local market in Canada, right? So it benefits us locally that they're exporting, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Now, the provincial government said the Clean Fuels Fund was a 2-year initiative totaling $6 million. They said the fund started in 2023-2024 with $3 million for 7 ready-to-launch projects. Another $3 million from 2024-2025 is supporting 7 more projects, and recipients were able to get 75% of project costs covered. If their costs were $500,000 or less, they could get 50% covered if their costs were more than $500,000. So how long will this study take? And once it's complete, what's the next stage there? What happens?
Yeah, excellent question. So we're hoping to have this study completed by the end of this financial year. So by the end of March 2026. Realizing I'm on record now having said that, so I better we better meet that. But no, we're quite confident that we'll meet that. What we then have is this roadmap that is kind of phased out. So basically it's going to tell us what should we focus on in the short term, medium term, and long term, aligned with where the feasibility lies, where what's the kind of low hanging fruit that we should focus on. So as I've already said, we're looking at many different areas of the local economy. So part of this study is also to create some excitement and some buy-in from these local businesses and players. We're going to make the results public to anyone, so anyone can use this and try and kind of make plans from this document that we're doing. We as municipalities is going to obviously look at it as the findings relate to our own operations. So the public works stuff that for example, I talked about before. And then whether it's there's a federal clean fund as well that I think opens every year. As you said, there might be another iteration of the provincial one. There's also the I think it's called the Green Municipal Fund. So basically, what we'll have from this strategy is kind of the next steps of, okay, we're then going to go out and try and find the funding for implementing some of these recommendations, and what is it that our processes, our the machinery, the equipment will need. But again, that's for us. We're one small part of it. We're hoping to excite and entice and encourage a lot of the players in the local economy to kind of do the same and try and get some planning and maybe some investment off the back of this strategy to implement some of these things.
So at the moment, what else are you working on, Martin?
Yeah, so I alluded to the offshore wind centre of excellence feasibility work that's wrapping up. We're just starting I mentioned this one as well, the extreme storm event flood hazard mapping work that we're going to be doing with a focus on Point Tupper. So basically a lot of investment, a lot of things are happening in Point Tupper, a lot of jobs in Point Tupper, but we want to try and understand how vulnerable, if vulnerable at all, Point Tupper is to changes in weather. So basically, we had obviously Fiona a couple of years ago. What would it look like if Fiona hit with sea levels rising as they will predicted to be at 2050 and in the year 2100? Would that have an impact? And if so, how much? And also, had Fiona hit slightly differently than it did, we were certainly probably were in the eye of that, I think, here. So we were spared compared to other areas of the province. But had it hit slightly differently, what would that have looked like? So we're going to be running some simulations on that and then try and do some planning off the back of that. So that's one we're kicking off right now as well. And then I'm just always speaking to local businesses and partners about some of the opportunities that exist around here. I'm doing a bit of a marketing piece together with the Cape Breton Partnership right now on our port facilities and basically using some of the findings in that infrastructure strategy that we published in January that I spoke about, using some of those findings and turn that into a bit of a promotional piece, basically highlighting all our port assets in one place, and particularly sort of how they could service green energy operations today and in the future. So those are some of the things I'm working on, yeah.
I know I've seen you at some meetings of Port Hawkesbury Town Council as well as Richmond Municipal Council, so I anticipate that I'll be seeing you when council resumes, and I imagine you'll be making some presentations as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I certainly will be doing at least one before Christmas, and then, yeah, probably a couple in next year as well. Yeah.
That's great. I'm sure I'll see you then. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me and our viewers and answer my questions. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks, Jake. It was a pleasure.
EverWind Fuels released the results of an independent greenhouse gas assessment showing that the Point Tupper Green Fuels project can deliver global climate benefits. According to EverWind, the study, which was conducted by Dunsky Energy Plus Climate Advisors, found that the project can reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year by replacing conventional fossil fuel-based ammonia with green ammonia. This represents 15 million tons of avoided emissions over the facility's 30-year operational lifespan, the company noted. EverWind said the Dunsky assessment found that, on average, producing green ammonia can cut emissions by 98%, compared to conventional ammonia produced from fossil fuels. The company said the study determined that the project can add renewable energy to the provincial grid, supporting stability and clean power integration. The Point Tupper Green Fuels project is expected to begin construction in 2026, EverWind said, noting it is expected to produce 240,000 tons of green ammonia annually, using new wind and solar generation capacity, incremental to Nova Scotia's current installed wind power. The company explained that green ammonia is created from green hydrogen, which is produced using renewable energy to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then combined with nitrogen from the air. This process eliminates the fossil fuels used in conventional ammonia production, which relies on natural gas or coal, EverWind said. The company said green ammonia is essential for decarbonizing hard-to-abate industrial sectors like steel, fertilizers, mining, chemicals, and manufacturing. They said these sectors must reduce emissions by approximately 38% to align with national climate targets. In addition, EverWind said the project will create skilled jobs and attract investment in rural communities, supports clean technology development and Canadian leadership in the global energy transition, and increases domestic energy security by reducing the reliance on imported fossil fuels. With environmental approvals in place, the company said its Point Tupper Green Fuels project is one of Canada's most advanced green hydrogen and ammonia developments and represents a key part of the country's clean energy future. Trent Vici, founder and CEO of EverWind, said the study confirms that his company is building a Made in Nova Scotia project that delivers real, measurable climate impact at global scale. With the Green Ammonia project and partnering with Mi'kmaq First Nations, Vici said EverWind can decarbonize hard-to-abate industries support Nova Scotia's grid, and help Canada meet its 2030 targets. He added that this is a win for Nova Scotia, a win for Canada, and a win for our allies who are racing to cut emissions. With me is the interim leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. Welcome back, Derek Mumbricket.
Hey, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We haven't spoken since the summer kind of started. I think it was late in June. So maybe you can update us on how the summer's been going for you.
Summer's been good. It's been busy. We've spent a lot of time touring around the province. I had the opportunity to be in many communities across the province. On the island too as well. We were in Sheddy Camp to meet with the community there. We plan on making some more stops around the island moving forward. And last night we were in the Valley, which we had a great turnout again last night. So we're around the province engaging Nova Scotians, talking about the issues that are important to them, whether they're more broad in scope and some that are specific to communities.
Now, as the Houston government shifts its focus to offshore wind, Nova Scotia Liberals want a more comprehensive energy strategy that includes, but doesn't solely depend on, a single large-scale project to meet the province's energy needs. While offshore wind holds promise, your party asserts that Nova Scotians can't afford to wait years for a project that still faces significant regulatory and logistical hurdles. Do you believe some of these hurdles might be hard to overcome, or is it just a matter of it's just going to take time?
Well, I think if you rewind the conversation around wind and offshore wind in particular, to your question, it really has been around for a decade. This name that you hear, Wind West, is actually not a new concept. This is something that I spent a lot of time focusing on when we were in energy. Looking at when I was energy minister, looking at the potential of offshore wind and what that future held for Nova Scotia as the possibility of exporting energy to other jurisdictions. Our concern was that we were hearing a lot about the offshore wind, and we weren't hearing enough about the actual infrastructure to actually move the energy, which the government wasn't talking about. And that's really the key to this. You need to be able to move the energy. And also for private companies to make investments, they're going to need to see a clear path on how, if they get into the offshore wind game here in the province, how they're going to move, how they're going to, really get a return on their investment, and how the energy is going to flow. So, what we've been saying, and we've said it to our federal counterparts too, is that infrastructure is really key. This conversation around the Atlantic Loop and the infrastructure that is necessary to move energy has been going on for years. Actually, a few years ago, the current premier was actually in a pretty heated discussion with the federal government of not supporting the Atlantic Loop. So for us, we see significant potential in offshore wind. We always have in greening our grid. The infrastructure is really key, but also giving Nova Scotians other opportunities to lower their carbon footprint and have the ability to make some of those changes at home. Like, for example, in my time in energy, we had the best solar program in the country. We no longer have a solar incentive, right, in this province. It's moves like that we've seen these programs cut. These were ways that Nova Scotians could help support the transition to cleaner energy, but also, reduce their carbon footprint, reduce their power bills. So there's a lot of discussion still to be had. It's really going to take a large investment and commitment from the federal government to see a nation-building project where you would actually see cable, from Nova Scotia that would be able to flow energy to and from the province.
Now, relying too heavily on a single project could leave Nova Scotia vulnerable, and a smarter path forward involves investing in a broader range of energy solutions, your party noted. In a press release issued on July 9th, you said Nova Scotians can't afford to bet everything on a single project that's still years away from becoming a reality. How is it that the government is betting on a single project? It seems like they are looking at other projects, but do you believe that they're just kind of putting all their eggs in one basket?
Well, yeah, great question. What I'll say is that the government has not talked about really offshore wind in the first 4.5 years of its mandate. So all of a sudden now, this is a big part of the conversation that they're marketing and they're promoting this Wind West concept. As I said, this conversation has been around for years, and ultimately, what needs to happen is you need the infrastructure necessary to move the energy. So what we're saying is, there's a lot of work that has to be done in the interim. They also will put bids out that companies will bid on to be part of what an offshore wind scenario looks like for Nova Scotia. I would argue that they should not do that until they have a clear commitment on the actual infrastructure to move the energy. I think that, in my opinion, you're not going to maximize the potential investment that private companies would look at in offshore wind if they don't have clear sight on what the infrastructure actually is to move the energy and also flow energy back. So what we're saying is we have to look at offshore wind. We should be looking at all the potential we have with onshore wind. We should be looking heavily at battery storage because that plays a real key part in the energy mix. And we should be looking at every incentive that we can provide that Nova Scotians can utilize to help, reduce their carbon footprint at home. Like I said, there were progressive programs over the years that are no longer existing. And these are decisions that have been made by the current government, and we argue that we see the vast potential of offshore wind. It's something that we support, but there's a lot of work, and you need to really start having the right conversation around what is actually necessary for it to happen.
The Liberals are calling for renewed investment in two-way energy transmission within Atlantic Canada. Maybe you can elaborate on what that entails.
So essentially, that's the infrastructure that I'm talking about. So, to move energy, to have large scale projects, you're going to need a regional partnership, really, where you're going to see infrastructure that would be built here in the province, connected to New Brunswick, eventually connected to Quebec, and some of that work is actually happening now. You're starting to see some of that work in various aspects in other provinces and a bit here, which is important. This is something that, the Atlantic Loop, that concept of having the ability to flow energy freely through the regions and have energy flow back. Because, we talk a lot about how we want to flow energy and export energy, but it's also about getting energy to come back through that infrastructure, because what we want ultimately is the cheapest energy prices that we can, provide to Nova Scotians. So that's really where our focus is. And again, this has been a conversation that has been years in the making. And when the Premier started talking about Wind West, you rewind about a year and a half, there was a heated discussion around that actual infrastructure that he didn't support at the time, which he actually needs for what he is calling Wind West to be successful.
Now, you mentioned this, your party criticized use in government for pausing key transmission upgrades like the Atlantic Loop, which you just talked about, which are critical to making any major energy project viable. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the Atlantic Loop, what that is for the uninitiated.
So essentially what the Atlantic Loop is just you think about the ability to flow energy around the region and eventually out. So you have the Maritime Link, which came in that's the link between Newfoundland that comes into Cape Breton, you know what I mean, and it flows. So that's a piece of that would be a piece of that loop, right? So then you're connecting, think about a loop, you know what I mean? You're thinking about the connection between the region, the provinces where energy is generated, that it can flow freely through that infrastructure. So that's the quick description of what is really going to be necessary as we move forward on clean energy projects, is upgrading that grid and making sure that we can flow that energy.
Now, you alluded to this as well earlier. Your party's calling for a competitive procurement for battery storage. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you guys mean by that.
So ideally you want competitive procurement for everything, you know what I mean? Like whether we're talking about energy or whether we're talking about anything else, you want to maximize you're using taxpayers' dollars for specific projects or doing specific initiatives around certain aspects of daily life and the future of the province. So in this case, what we're calling for is we want an open, transparent, competitive process around procurement of battery storage, and it's important to be as transparent as possible.
Now, the other thing you mentioned too was increased support for solar energy and other clean technologies. So is your party and you of the belief that the present government has not done enough to support things like solar energy?
So I will say this. So as I said, in my time in energy as the minister, we had a residential solar incentive that was in place that provided a rebate to Nova Scotians who installed solar on their property in their house. That not only did it enable Nova Scotians to reduce their energy bills and reduce their carbon footprint, but it also put a lot of people to work. You saw a lot of solar companies, installation companies pop up around the province, and those initiatives no longer exist. So we'll go into the fall, and we're going to be talking about this again in the fall. Is that one of the best ways that we Nova Scotians can help support new energy in the sense of whether it's solar or anything else is to give and provide incentives that people can utilize in their daily life. There were incentives around electric vehicles and some incentives around e-bikes and stuff too that no longer exist. And I use the residential solar one as probably one of the best examples because that was it was rated the best in the country at one point. We received a lot of credit and support from around the country for that incentive. So that's the stuff we want government to look at. That's the stuff that we want government to focus on while they're having a conversation about projects that really are years away.
Now, we spoke about diversification as far as renewable energy, but the province is also really pushing for mineral extraction, or at the very least to look into mineral extraction.
Yeah.
Does this give you some concern that we're rushing too much into this and we're not really considering all the ramifications of this push?
Well, I just think that the government, to me, this has been really more of a marketing and communications strategy by the government to talk about resource development when actually they didn't do any of the homework necessary to actually get into the business. And there's a couple of examples I can give you. So, for example, the government just announced that they're putting bids in for the offshore for oil and gas exploration. So my question is, why haven't they done it for the last 5 years? I put out multiple bids as energy minister. Ian, as premier, put out bids as the premier. No bids came back at those times. So all of a sudden, the government's not explaining the science behind it and why they're doing it. All of a sudden, this becomes a push. What we've argued from the mineral resource side of on land is that the government should actually do the science. They should map the province. The Mining Association has called for this as well. Map the province. Look where your potential is. Map it out. Look at your ecologically sensitive areas and see where the potential is. They removed the ban on uranium mining and fracking, and they said that they were going to consult communities, and they didn't consult communities. So it's been a mess, to be honest, from my perspective, as someone who's been heavily involved with it. We did a lot of science before we put bids out in the offshore. You do the science to find out where your best potential is, but you also do the science to protect your other traditional industries. As you know, fishing is a massive part of our economy and the livelihoods of people across the province. And, we ensured that, that's very much top of mind to make sure you protect those fishing grounds and you protect those livelihoods too as well. So, the government never did that. So they never did that on land. We argued, I tabled a bill in the legislature calling for geological survey of map out the entire province, and the government hasn't acted on it.
On the healthcare front, Tim Houston's Progressive Conservatives largely came to power in 2021 on a promise to fix healthcare. Since then, a lot of money and resources have been allocated, but still emergency departments are closed, and thousands of Nova Scotians are still going without doctors. Have you seen any improvement in healthcare? And what is the current state of healthcare in Nova Scotia?
So I hear the stories that many hear around the ERs. I hear the long wait times at the Cape Breton Regional, and I do want to thank the medical professionals in our community that work each day to support our families. Every government's going to make investments around healthcare. And to your point, the government came in to power, the current government, talking about fixing healthcare, and one of the tools they used was the doctor wait list, which they have eliminated. So, we've raised the flags around the validity of the data that people are actually seeing, because they're saying that people are removed off of the list. And if people are, that's great. We want every Nova Scotian to have access to a doctor for their families. But we can't track the data because he removed it. So the same information that they use to propel themselves to power, they don't show Nova Scotians now. So there's that concern for us when it comes to actually the validity of that list. Also, we hear the same conversations around ER closures across the province. It is still a very challenging time. And in committee, we actually had committee yesterday where we had doctors come in who told us that many of the patients that they support in communities aren't even on the list, and they never knew the list existed. So we need the government to really do a better job of being more transparent around what that list looks like, and actually what their plan is around these ER closures, because they're happening a lot and the wait times are very significant.
Your party had some criticisms of the way the cybersecurity breach at Nova Scotia Power was handled. Has anything happened since that leads you to believe that this won't happen again and that things have been addressed?
Yeah, so on that piece, I can say I've been a politician I've been MLA now for 10 years. And our letter that we sent out to request Nova Scotia Power to come in was probably one of the most viewed letters I've ever had. We've had hundreds of thousands of people view the letter, and people were really upset. You know what I mean? You had over 240,000 people's information was compromised. Offices were, people were scared. They needed answers. So we thought it was important to bring Nova Scotia Power in. So we've been engaging with Nova Scotia Power. We had a meeting with them again last week, where, I raised the same concerns around what we're hearing in offices. Told them that they need to have more support on the ground to support families who are trying to navigate if their information is compromised. And the big message for me with them was that, this estimating people's power bills needs to stop. Like, they need to provide accurate billing information to people. I get a lot of calls on that in my local office, and I hear the stories from people who are getting these estimated bills. That they need to bring that predictability back to people, and we're going to continue to engage with them. And they've indicated to me that they appreciate the feedback that we're providing as a caucus. I've dealt with Nova Scotia Power in multiple facets, especially in my energy days. So. We try to keep that open line of communication, ultimately to help Nova Scotians, but also to hold Nova Scotia Power accountable.
Now, on the Nova Scotia Power front, I know there some concern have been expressed about, increasing bills and rates going up. Do you still have that concern about power rates and about the bills of customers of Nova Scotia Power?
Yeah, well, of course, cost of living is one of the biggest things that we hear. Everything has gone up substantially in price when it comes to what people are using or their families are using on a daily basis. So we've seen some substantial increases in power rates under the Houston government since they came in, and it's a concern. So when Nova Scotia Power comes forward and they're looking for something, or they have an initiative on the way, like we were talking last week about some current affairs and some of the stuff that the future may hold for the utility in the province. I told them the foundation to everything is ensuring that your customers are supported. Ultimately, Nova Scotians are the ones that are paying. They're using the utilities' electricity. They're paying the bills. Nova Scotia Power needs to be accountable to them, and honestly shouldn't be coming in for any rate increases to cover the costs of what the cybersecurity breach looks like, and make sure that people are supported.
Now, your colleagues in the opposition, the Nova Scotia NDP, have been issuing press releases and statements about housing Nova Scotia, and particularly their concern surrounds the inability of the province to raise the housing stock to meet the public need that exists. And one idea was the creation of a dedicated Department of Housing. Do you share the concerns of the NDP, and do you think that creation of that department as a solution, or how do you view that issue?
Well, so it's a great point, and it's something that we said too as well, is that there used to be a dedicated minister for housing in this province. It was prominent in the portfolio of someone who was holding that office, and now it's not. We're hearing a lot of conversation about this at a federal level too as well, and ultimately government is going to have to decide, how far they want to get into the housing business themselves. So, there are incentives for private developers, and there's some non-for-profits, and there's some great examples around the province and communities where, communities have come together to support various types of housing. For me, I think it's a case of the government's going to really have to get into the business of it and build housing, but also look at different incentives, maybe ones that are not geared as much towards bigger developers, because we've seen that some policies over the years come out that supported developers that were going to build substantially bigger housing developments. In our case, in Cape Breton and in your community, like you wouldn't, I would argue you would never see a development like that. So like, what does it look like to support those small developers, those developers that have land that may build a smaller residential unit or build duplexes or however, because there's a whole market out there of demand for various aspects of housing. And I'll say this as an example. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I was talking to some folks with the CBRM Council, and there is a very large number of people living in their family home alone for various reasons. And they're trying to downsize, and there's no option. So we need to find ways that we can look at incentives that developers in smaller communities will actually use to build, so those people can transition out, and that will help also, I believe, with a lot of people who want to buy their first home.
Another criticism from the opposition, including your party, has been what has been termed the secrecy and lack of accountability of this current provincial government. Do you still have those concerns? Has anything taken place that shows a little bit more transparency on their part?
Well, I think it's the way I look at it, and history is a dictator. Like, we've seen a number of things that the government has tried to do, whether it was, firing the Auditor General without cause, or looking at ways to reduce transparency when it came to the public service. You're seeing these decisions that are being made without consultation. They were in the legislature talking about, lifting the ban on uranium mining, saying they only wanted to do it to consult, and then the exploration started, and it really kind of surprised a lot of communities around the province because they never heard anything. They haven't engaged with First Nations leaders when it came to resource development. So again, I go back to the fact that what you're seeing, in my opinion, is a lot of a communication strategy around build. The economy has been a big focus of their messaging as of late. But there's been really no background provided of why they're saying what they're saying in certain cases, and really what the plan is, right? It sounds flashy, and it sounds popular, and people, I think their goal is to try to tell people that there's a plan. I just don't see the plan. Like, I don't see the nuts and bolts of the plan. Like, and again, we've talked about a number of examples today around the energy file. It's like the conversation is not going in the direction that it needs to go to actually make these things become a reality. I think the government's starting to start talking about them because it's the actual logistics that they're going to need to do things. But it's just a lot of communication for me, and not a lot of background or a plan.
In some quarters, the provincial government has been criticized for travel and fire bans due to the hot, dry weather we've experienced recently, and the high probability of wildfires as a result of these conditions. Does your party agree with the steps the province has taken to try to prevent wildfires?
Yeah, I'll say this as someone who lived the pandemic, and in my time as education, when we were at the height, it was really the second wave. Governments are going to make decisions in the best interests of safety, but also the best interests of the people who are actually on the ground doing the work each and every day to support families. So I agree. Like, people should not be in the woods right now. That is not a political. I would suspect that's probably not a political decision. I think the government needs to do some more communication around it, but I would suspect that that's coming from a recommendation from our EMO staff, fire professionals across the province, and I'm talking to them at home too as well. These people are going to go out and fight a fire. There's one happening in Halifax now, and to see the professionalism, everybody scramble to get to that fire, to knock it down. We saw one in Cape Breton, just on the outskirts of Sydney there not long ago. We had one as well closer to you earlier on in the season, and we need to protect them. They're out there protecting us. And, I just encourage people. It's very dry. It is. And it's tough. But I've been in that situation where I've had to make those tough calls too as well. But I made those calls based on the information that I was given by healthcare professionals, people in the education field, to make sure we were making the right decisions at the time. So I guess that's a long way of saying it, but we encourage people follow the notices. They're coming from the municipalities too as well. And let's support our wonderful first responders, our fire, our emergency, everybody that's going to be involved with this. Like I said, we're seeing it firsthand, the work that they do. Let's support them.
Now, with the fall session of the Nova Scotia Legislature a couple of months away, I'm assuming there are some issues your party is looking at tackling during that time.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So there are a number of things that we'll start talking about in the coming weeks. We'll again have a focus on, the economy and what we think can help support Nova Scotia moving forward. We're looking at some bills around healthcare. We're in the early stages of some of the stuff, but we'll be ready to go. We're excited to get back in there. As I said, a lot of what we're doing across the province is really engaging with communities, engaging on what's important to them, and that's really kind of driving the process around, the legislation that we're looking at tabling in the fall.
Now, you alluded to you went to Shettycamp for a visit, and of course, as you know, there's going to be a new riding, an Acadian riding, like there is here in Richmond County. So, when do you anticipate there's going to be a by-election? I know there's a process that's involved in forming this riding, and but I would anticipate that there would be a by-election soon, and I assume part of what your reason for going up there was in anticipation of that. So when do you see that happening? What's the process there?
So Ian actually served on the committee, so he would probably be better to give you the timeline. But what I can say is that they have to. The community consultation is taking place. We know that the community is engaged in the conversation now. There would be nothing until the new year. So. And then ultimately it would be the decision of the premier whether he wanted to call a by-election or not. So I know that the community would like that. I think I know the community is excited. And we as a caucus and as Cape Breton too as well, that has connections to communities all over the island. Shettycamp has wanted this for a long time. To respect the French language, we fully support the riding, and we know that people are excited about having the riding and recognizing the rich Acadian culture that Shettycamp has. So we wait and see, but we'll be ready.
Now, politically speaking, Shettycamp has tended to vote Liberal even in some elections. When Rodney McDonald ran in, Alan McMaster after him in the broader riding of Inverness. And I would imagine, like any riding, but this would be a riding that you guys would be looking at, to try to increase the seat total. And it's a winnable riding possibly for your party.
Well, I think the important thing is, I go into any by-election in Shettycamp, could very well be the next one, with a plan for the community. And that's why we went to Shettycamp, as part of the tour. We had a great night, met a lot of folks in the community who came out to listen to me and Ian, met with some great organizations, looked at some of the important infrastructure around town when it comes to, the boardwalk and there's some examples of stuff that we think can happen in the community. And we sent letters off to the departments that were responsible for it. And that's first and foremost, you know what I mean? Like, I think the people of Shettycamp ultimately will decide. They will decide who it's going to be. But I think, for me, Camp will elect somebody that's going to best represent the community, regardless of political stripe. So for me, of course, we're the Liberal caucus, and we would love to represent the community. But most importantly, it's to show the community that we care, and that we will have candidates come forward and make sure that they are prepared to carry the Liberal banner. But most importantly, it's about the community.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me, answer my questions, speak with our viewers. Thank you very much, Derek.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.